Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Adam Lobel, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Radboud University in Nijmegen. And I study the psychological effects of video games, and that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. But before I start, let's just give it up for esports and this event. I mean, this is incredible. Yeah. I mean, also, if there's anybody that could have pulled this off, it's Frank, so kudos to you, man. So like I said, I'm going to be talking about the psychological effects of video games, and I like to think that my credentials as a gamer, that's not working. You want to get me up on the screen, please? Dun, dun, dun. I have slides, and they're helpful. They're better than looking at me. Psychology, esports. Here we are. Okay, see, that's me, and that's the stuff that I study, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Yes, so I study the psychological effects of video games, and I'm still not working. Am I working? Yeah, fine. Oh. But my clicker isn't going. Am I working? My clicker. I'm trying to get to the next slide, and it's just not going. I'm really sorry for this. This is kind of embarrassing. Feedback, guys? Yeah. Yeah, I'm clicking. Should we just like ad-lib it? Like I can just kind of signal to you and then you can kind of do your thing. Yeah? Okay, so I'll just kind of do this and then you'll just go to the next slide. Yeah? That didn't work. He's funny. Something? Stressing me out. Okay. Okay. So would you go back a slide? Some people have just come in, so I thought I'd just introduce myself again very quickly. For everybody that just joined us, my name is Adam Lobel. I study the psychological effects of video games, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I like to think that my credentials as a gamer, Frank, yeah, are we totally not working? Well, I like to think that my credentials as a gamer sort of make me perfect for the job that I do, for the research that I do. Yeah. And of course, these are all pretty old video games, but I still think that there's a way in which they kind of helped shape me into who I am today. Ultimately, though, I'm a researcher first and a gamer second. So when I thought, well, I've got to prepare a 20-minute presentation for a group of people here to see really fast-paced video games, I thought, well, yeah, talking about academia and science is probably going to end in an epic fail. So don't take that route. It's not the way to go. So I'm hoping that we can try to do something a little bit more interactive. And by interactive, I mean I want to try to play a game with you that I call Fact, Fiction, or Mystery. And I'm going to say a psychological effect, a statement about a psychological effect, and hopefully you'll answer me what you think, whether it's fact, fiction, or mystery. Yeah? Just a couple of disclaimers first. Disclaimer number one is that science is really slow about calling anything a fact. It just happens to be that saying generally accepted by the scientific community doesn't have much of a ring to it, so we'll just call it fact, but it's not really fact. So disclaimer number one. And number two is, what I'd like you to do now actually is just take like 10, 15 seconds and think about what effects do you think video games might have. So what do you want researchers like me to be finding out more about video games? 10 seconds, think about it, hold on to it, and maybe at the end we'll get a chance to discuss some of your ideas. Nice. Okay, so whenever you talk about the effects of the psychological effects of video games, there's always the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is always violent video games cause violence. So what do you guys think? Is this fact, fiction, or mystery? fiction. Okay, well, I think a lot of you guys are maybe reacting in quite an emotional from an emotional way. I would venture to say that it's more along the lines of mystery, and I'm going to explain to you why. Well, first of all, to really answer this question and to show why it's a bit of a mystery, you need to explain that the research looks at this question in two parts. First is the short-term effects of playing violent games and the long-term effects. So let's talk about the short-term effects. How do they look to see whether playing a violent video game makes you more aggressive? So the studies are basically pretty simple. They put people randomly into a condition where they either play a very innocuous, non-violent game, or they play a very violent video game. And then afterwards, they try to measure their aggressive thoughts and their aggressive behaviors. Now, this is maybe where things aren't so straightforward, right? Measuring thoughts and behaviors. So I'm going to explain to you a bit about how they try to do this. When they measure aggressive thoughts, they basically present people with an open-ended situation, and they see what type of thoughts first come to mind. So either people are given a bunch of words that, for instance here, the word ki//__. Will you fill that in with a word like kill or kiss? And the argument is that if you say kill, then aggressive thoughts are more in your mind. And another way in which they do this is that they create a scenario that is kind of ambiguous, a bit of a conflict perhaps, and it's open-ended in terms of what's going to happen next. And they ask the participant, well, what's going to happen next? And they see how many aggressive thoughts come out. When it comes to aggressive behaviors, I would say that there are two main types of, there are two ways in which that they measure aggressive behaviors in the lab. Next thingy, please. Ka-chunk. Thank you. There's two ways. One is what I would call the sonic boom task. And the idea of this task is that you have a chance to blast somebody in the other room with a very loud noise, and you can choose how loud this noise is. So they measure how loud are you going to blast this other person's ears. And the other one is like a hot sauce task, where you have the opportunity to put hot sauce in someone's drink, and they measure how much hot sauce you put in there, and they say, well, this is a sign of aggression. So when they do these types of studies, you play either a regular video game or like a violent video game, and then they measure these things afterwards. The majority of the literature actually points to showing that people do indeed become more aggressive in these ways right after having played a violent video game. So the discussion there isn't so much about the studies that have been done, but more about the measure that's been done. And there's a big push out there against these ideas in terms of saying, well, this is not really what real-world violence looks like, so this isn't strong enough evidence. So there's a push back and forth within the community. That's the short-term side of things. In the long-term side of things, they have much better measures for violence and aggression, I should say. What they do is they follow people over a number of years, and they ask people within their social circle how aggressively they behave. So they're getting information from all these different people around them about their real everyday behaviors. And so there's basically two lines of research. One line of research comes out and says, well, when we look at all of the studies that look at following people and finding about their aggressive behaviors, when we put them all together, we observe a small but significant effect of playing violent video games and becoming more violent. But on the other side, you have this other group of researchers who also say that you're missing it. There are so many studies that have gone unpublished on this same topic that really the studies that have been found, it's totally by chance. Because when you look at them all in the broader spectrum, it all balances out. So ultimately, when we try to answer the question of do violent video games cause violence, the debate rages on. So that's question one. Number two. Video games improve the brain's perceptual abilities. And what I mean by that is the brain might be able to keep track of more pieces of information, your vision might be getting better, your 3D maps are better. What do you guys think? Fact, fiction, or mystery? Fact. Wow, everybody's like positive, yeah. Well, you guys are right. It's fact, I should say. So there's a number of studies that are going to illustrate this. People are indeed better able to keep track of multiple things. I want to draw your attention to this diagram up here. This is non-gamers and frequent gamers being asked to exert their attentive abilities onto something. And what you see is that there's much less brain activity in the frequent gamers. And they take that as a sign of the fact that they need to use less brain resources in order to attend to the same amount of information. And that's a pretty strong finding that's come out. And when we think about vision, they've also illustrated that video gamers, frequent gamers, are better able to distinguish between very small, minute changes in color. something which might actually be very useful if you're driving late at night on a dimly lit road and you need to see the signs or cars or people. And then the third set of findings shows that indeed, because of all the 3D mapping that you need to be doing in games, that people do have better 3D spatial models based on playing video games. And I want to just clarify what some of these studies are actually doing. Because these studies are actually quite strong, because what they have people do is they have one group of people who don't play well, they basically start out with a group of people that never play video games. And they divide them into two groups. And one group, they ask them to play for a whole week a lot of action video games. And they observe these changes. And action video games is the nice scientific term for FPS games and third-person shooters, games where you do need to keep track of lots of things on the screen, and games where small changes in color can actually mean a lot in terms of reward and punishment in your environment, and games where keeping track of a three-dimensional map is very important. So these types of games are actually shown to have a positive effect on the brain's ability to perceive things. So you're leveling up your brain in some sense. Question number 3. Video games, I should say statement number 3. Video games help with problem solving. They make you better at problem solving. What do you guys think? Fact, fiction, or mystery? Fact? Fiction? I hear a fiction. Fiction? I would say mystery. And I'll explain to you why. I mean, this is something that's like hotly talked about. So if you like go on the internet and you search for problem solving, you're going to find lots and lots of articles and tweets and discussions about, yes, video games help with problem solving. And the gist of the argument is pretty much, well, video games involve problem solving. I'm solving problems in the game. So it must be that in my everyday life, I'm also better at solving problems. But I'm here to tell you that there is no comprehensive research in this field, pretty much whatsoever. So it's really quite unknown. And I would argue that that's probably because the whole concept of problem solving is quite vague and broad, like what type of problems are being solved. But I do want to share with you some things that we do know from the literature. For instance, we do know that when gamers are playing games, they have to think in problem-solving-like ways. So there are studies where children or adults are told to play a game and think out loud. And they record what people are saying, and they code it afterwards, and they say, oh, wow, this pattern of thinking is like problem-solving. So problem-solving is happening while people are playing games. Something you probably could have told me already, but still, it's out there. Another really interesting study that came out a while ago came from people that were basically lurking these World of Warcraft forums, and they were looking at what people were typing inside the forums. And they took all that, they coded that information, and they saw how much people were actually talking in scientific ways, testing out ideas, being critical thinking. And they observed a lot of critical thinking in these World of Warcraft forums. So it seems that there might be an association between problem solving and certain types of gaming. The last thing I want to do in this topic is share with you a really interesting study that tries to show this longitudinal effect of this problem solving. So when we think about the World of Warcraft guys, well, you would think maybe because they like problem solving, that's why they play World of Warcraft, not that playing Warcraft might make you be better at problem solving. 5 minutes. Really? Well, I'm going to skip this then. And I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to skip this, and I'll tell you there's a great longitudinal study. And I'm going to skip, and I'm going to skip. And I'm going to tell you that we don't really know. Time is going to tell. And now I want to tell you about the study that I ran on StarCraft, where I am interested in the idea that video games can help people solve emotional problems. And the gist of the idea and the gist of my research is to look at the associations between how we deal with stress in everyday contexts and how we deal with stress in a video game context. And what I'm interested in terms of research is seeing whether experiencing stress in the video game, whether overcoming that stress and experiencing that for yourself can benefit you in everyday contexts, because the feeling of stress, what happens to your body when you're feeling stress in both contexts is essentially the same. That's the idea that I want to explore with you with this study. So normally this line of thought, the first thing I need to convince people of is that video games are stressful. But you guys play StarCraft, which is chess on steroids, so you know it's a stressful game. It's stressful, right? But there is some literature out there that shows that when people do play games, it is stressful, which is really nice. And so the kernel of the study that I'm going to talk about now in the next 3 minutes is, the kernel of the study is that I wanted to think of what process is common to both contexts. So what aspects of dealing with stress happen both in a game and in everyday contexts. And I want to say that, and what I think the answer to that question is something called interoceptive awareness. And interoceptive awareness is a really fancy term for being aware of what's happening to your body in terms of your physiology. And this is tightly linked to your emotions, because when you feel an emotion, your body changes in a very specific way. Understanding what your body is going through when you're feeling when you're going through these stressful situations is beneficial for you to be able to deal with those emotions. So if you understand the source of them and you understand how to bring your body down, then you're going to be better able to control your emotions in stressful situations. And that's out there in the literature. So I did a study where I wanted to see whether players who are more aware of their bodily changes while they're playing a stressful game, StarCraft 2, whether these players would also show more healthy tendencies of dealing with stress in everyday contexts. That's the idea of my study. And I'm going to kind of skip through this slide because it's about the methods, but that's the gist of the study. OK, and I'm going to skip this video clip. It's essentially explaining that we measure their heart rate during the game, and then right after we get their heart rate, then we have them watch a game on a replay and rate throughout the entire game how much stress they think they felt at every moment of the game. And what you end up with is something that looks like this. This is their heart rate during the game, the blue line, and the red line is how much stress they think they felt at each moment of the game while watching it again right after the match. And this is somebody who I would say has very low interoceptive awareness. So if you see throughout like a big portion of the game, they think they experience lots of stress, but their body says that it doesn't. And if we look at another participant, we can see that's much better because the relative scores are going up and down at pretty much the same rate. And in pretty much the same places. So this is an example of somebody who is good at it. And I'm going to skip my next video, but I basically wanted to show you a bit of like how this looks in the lab. This is some gameplay footage. We're just going to skip right through, because you guys have seen lots of StarCraft today already. And we're just going to get our way to the findings. So you guys understand the question? The question is, when I compare the heart rate and I compare the dial, does those who are more aware, are they going to show healthier tendencies of dealing with their emotions in everyday contexts? And the answer was, we observed three things that I can mention. The first one is that people that were better were more likely to actively try to resolve a problem. So they reported, it's all self-report, we're asking them this. They report saying that yes, when I have a stressful situation, I get right to it and I try to solve the problem. And we also observe a trend, so it's not fully significant, but it's in the right direction, of them also seeking instrumental support, turning to others to try to like concretely solve their problems. And we see a negative association with them withdrawing away from problems. So these are some ways in which I think we can push this research forward. And the main conclusion I want you to walk away with is that it's necessary for much more research to be done to look at this over the long term. So having people play these stressful games and seeing how they downregulate their stress during the game, whether over time that will help them in everyday contexts deal with real stressful situations. So to wrap things up, it remains a mystery whether violent video games cause violence. It is a fact that video games improve your perceptual abilities. It remains a mystery whether or not problem solving is improved, and I believe and hope that more research will be done in the field to see whether or not video games can help people deal with their emotions and better overcome stress in everyday contexts. Thank you very much for your attention. And I also want to thank everybody that was involved that made all this research possible. My supervisors, who are not up on the screen, and Frank as well, who helped with our data collection. If you're interested in any of these slides, well, you can't see it now. If you're interested in any of these slides, contact me, contact Frank. I can get you the slides. I'm on Twitter, and you can follow me and all that. Thank you.